Well, welcome. If it is that you've joined me today, then that must mean one of two things. I'm going to go with that it's Wednesday and it's Pacific Daylight Time, and you're tuning in to Naked with Dr. Money. And so, welcome. I'm happy that you've joined me again today as we continue this conversation around mindset, motivations, and manifestations. And so many of you know I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey. I'm the CEO of ZenoVerse Wellness Group, which includes brands such as 420 Wellness Jamaica, 420 Wellness London, 420 Wellness South Africa, and many other countries in the pipeline. So hopefully you'll be registering and coming to spend some time with us at one of our wellness resorts around the world. But today, I am going to have a conversation with a guest who I'll tell you a little bit about shortly. But it's usually this kind of framework around mindset, because what I noticed over the journey of building organizations, of being part of organizations, is that however you approach whatever it is you're doing requires you to have a certain mindset. You bring in a certain mindset into the environments, but you also have a certain mindset that you maintain whether you're in a particular environment or not, meaning how you go about doing the things that you do, how it is you determine which things to do, all of those things, right? So today we're really addressing a number of needs because, again, mindset is that emotional piece. So I am going to tell you a little bit about my guest because I think we're going to have a fascinating conversation. So, in case you haven't had an opportunity to read one of his many collection of books, I would urge you to go out and look up Chef Keidi. One of the books, Living Superfood. I mean, he has a full collection of books aimed at informing, educating, and creating a call to action so that you can live your best life. But he's known as a celebrity chef, a dynamic main stage speaker, and one of the most productive health research writers for the generation. Chef Keidi is on a powerful mission to spread his unique gospel of perfect health. Audiences are consistently amazed at a depth of health science wisdom that Chef Keidi serves up to support his claim that food is nature's most perfect medicine, and medicine has never tasted like this before. He is the creator of the Living Superfood brand of nutrition dense, raw vegan cuisine, as well as the author of multiple books touting the Living Superfood clinical nutrition system. So, without any further ado, I'm going to bring on Chef Keidi. And if it is you decide to follow us on our 20 city tour, you'll get an opportunity to meet Chef in person. So, hey, Chef, how you doing today?
Oh, I am feeling absolutely wonderful. And what a joy it is to be here today, naked with Dr. Money.
I'm excited. Hey, could I ask you to see if you can increase your audio just a little bit? I can hear you really low.
Really low. Okay, I'm going to go in. I'm going to tweak my audio settings, and it should be reading quite well actually right now. I'm looking at my VU meter, and it's poking the top level.
Okay. All right. Maybe it's just coming through a little bit low on my side, but perhaps the broadcast will be perfect in the end.
It needs to be perfect because you and I have some very serious topics to talk to people about today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I was sharing in the intro, is I use this space because a lot of times people have said to me, "Oh, Stephanie, you're such a high achiever. You know, you can do everything. So we could never do what you're doing." And so, really, when Doc and I intersected and began to merge our business plans to bring the wellness resorts, and all of this holistic care together, and recognize that we could launch immediately as a global organization rather than just this, being a domestically based organization, it became clear that by starting to incorporate some of the inputs of his guidance, and then also, when you and I came across one, there was like, wow, there's a lot of synergy. We're talking about the same things, attending your dinners. And it was like I was in this process of transforming my body and my mind and my soul back to balance, because I knew that I was out of balance, and I knew that I was going to be out of balance for a period of time. But I also knew that after that commitment, I was going to have to get back in alignment. So this conversation began as a way to kind of share with folks how, when you're busy, committed to things, you still can make and set intentions to maintain your wellness, and making sure that you're looking at detoxing your mind, body, and soul, as well as making sure that you're feeding yourself in all of those ways. So, Keidi, when is it that, from your perspective, you first realized that you had a mindset? And how did you know that that was a particular mindset?
This concept of mindset is a very powerful concept. And one really has to kind of think about this in the context of all of our personal experiences. If I look back at who I have become at this stage of my life, it really goes back to the very earliest stages of life. I may not even have been aware of mindset or concepts such as this, but I can see now the patterns in my life. So this mindset, I think it emerges really from the guidance of my parents, two absolutely brilliant people. My father was an industrial chemist. My mother was just a multi-genius who manifested in the real world. And could my mindset have evolved from breastfeeding from my mother until way beyond? Everybody says, well, you can stop any year now. But for me, I was on my mother's bosom up until the entirety of our life together. She died when I was 7. And I can recall, I don't think I was eating from her bosom, but I can recall being that close to her. Now I know when we're talking about mindset, much of that is the organic mind, the neurological system, the brain structure of gray matter, etc. And now I know that our brain grows for 3 years outside the body. So for this extended period that I was nurturing from the breast of a woman who was considered by her peers to be a true genius, I know that that transferred a lot of that into me. So if we're looking at the conscious awareness of who we are and what our purpose is in life, I would say it probably is coming to me in stages from about the age of 18 or 19. When I left high school, secondary school, I didn't enroll in college. I didn't even fill out any applications, despite the fact that I had been consistently an honor roll student. But my subconscious mindset found me working in a biological research laboratory 1 year after graduating high school. So for the next 4 years, I was actually living my early adult life, going to college, the real world of the biological sciences. And so the last point I'll make about mindset, when did it all start to come together to realize the power that I had as an individual in this world? I would say it was when I started writing books. And that really consolidated the personality that now is invited to this conversation.
Well, it's interesting because you basically touched on two of the thoughts that I have, because I believe that mindset is both a little bit of the nature of the person, but I definitely believe it's how it's nurtured. And I think that that's why this conversation is so important, because the intention is to help people think about it, especially parents with young kids, because it's really when your kids are very early, young, their personalities. It's sort of like the analogy my mother used to use when we would talk about, being connected to source, being connected to spirit source. And one of the analogies that she used very early on is it's sort of like each of us are like a television set you buy from the store. We're complete, whole, and perfect. But when we're plugged into source, then we really function. We're able to function based on everything that's there. And so source in the beginning is a combination of the spirit source before it is we connect in the womb, and then before we exit the womb, we're connected to source. And so when you are feeding into that embryo that's developing as a human being, taking shape, taking form, and then it emerges into this world, then you have to continue to either nurture, because your words, your guidance are going to be from your own healed perspective, or they're going to be from your hurt. And so when you're sowing into or responding to, because what it is sometimes is, I think young people, they're finding their way. So they're expressing themselves. And sometimes we shut them down. I've seen this happen so often. You see a young person moving around, go sit down and be still. Oh, that person is so energetic. Well, that's part of their DNA, unless it is that they're overloaded with sugar, or it's a nutritional problem that's causing them to have the inability to manage their body. If that's not an issue, then the rest of it is their nature. So they have extra energy. So you've got to give them some tools, to help dispense some of that energy in a healthy way, instead of saying, oh, go sit in a corner because you're moving around, you're behaving. That's unfortunately a harmful approach to that energy, which I think begins to influence the mindset, because you slowly begin to subtly make that person feel that who they are showing up in a space, that their energy is not welcome in that space, which begins to frame a sort of boundary around their mindset.
Well said.
I mean, I see that, because, that's where when they talk about the educational system and our young boys, 8 years old, at 8 years old, they're trying to determine how many are going to go on in life, or how many prison beds should they plan for the next, decade. And so again, a lot of these things have a lot to do with messaging and boundary setting and all of that stuff by the folks who are most intimately involved in one's life during their most formative years, the years that they are mostly influenced. So I find it interesting that not only your parents and your background was so rich. I mean, Keidi, you
Mhm.
unloaded a lot in that statement of both the time that you had with your mother, losing your mother early in your life, which is a whole nother experience that most people would say would be a real hard. For me, I'd say that's that fork in the road. So from the time of your early nurturing from your mom to at the point where you lost your mother, what type of mindset transitions do you think you experienced, or did you have any transitions
Mhm.
from
Well, in
experience?
the environment that we grew up in, my father again was a scientist. He bought land in a rural area where a number of black families were buying land from a retiring black farmer who had 40 acres. He parceled it and sold it only to black families. 21 of us bought land, and my father contracted to build his own house out there. So in that environment, everything was there that was needed to inspire the highest level of confidence in all of the residents of the neighborhood, all of the children. There were a lot of children occupying these 21 houses. And so we had a brilliant and really beautiful peer support network. All of the families were kind and generous, and we all looked out for each other. This was the kind of neighborhood where you didn't lock your house and you left your keys in your car ignition overnight. And so there was a lot of trust, confidence, nurturing, support. And we also, nearly every family out there had their own garden, and ours was one of the larger gardens. And so uh, we planted surplus food, which we sold to the local market. And so we all had jobs at an early age. So when we're talking about nature and nurture, there is a convergence that takes place that you and I have discussed this, that we believe to be the optimal environment for to raise our children in, to allow our children to grow to be the spectacular human beings that every point that every parent aspires that your children grow into. So all of that was great. Yet it wasn't enough, because despite all of these wonderful accomplishments early in life, I still had these driving ambitions to be something else. And of course, this was an era when television and pop culture are starting to become more and more dominant in the lives of young people. So I'll be honest with you, by the time I finished 4 years of working in this biological laboratory after high school, I wanted to be a rock star. And so I left the job, left Ohio, and for the next 30 years, traveled around the country, traveled around the world, and lived out my rock star fantasy as a career musician.
Wow. Well, tell me about that. So when you were first introduced to music, you say, did you play instruments early on, or were you exposed to music in the household?
Our whole family was musicians, and we had an incredible environment. Whereas our parents had both had a musical background. My mother was a gospel singer, and she was really quite renowned in that area in Central Ohio. And whenever they would have conferences or everything, they'd have to have Dolores come up and sing a gospel song. She was really, really quite spectacular singer. And in our house, as we were growing up, four sons growing up, we inherited musical instruments from, I know there was one family friend who had been a career musician. When he died, his whole attic came to our house, and we had xylophones, we had drums, we had pianos, we had guitars. And then, again, this is in the 1960s, so we're starting to see the formation of bands becoming very, very popular. So our house had a basement where the local bands that my older brothers were playing in, we used to rehearse at our house in the basement. And so during the days when I was at home, I would sneak down in the basement and I would go from instrument to instrument to instrument. So I ultimately learned to play 10 different instruments and was able to, develop my proficiency sneaking down in the basement and playing on my brother's band members' instruments. It was really quite an incredible environment, which I was able to convert to a lifetime of achievement.
Which I think is also so important, because I too had the pleasure of coming from a musical family. And so, my earliest memories are being immersed in the music, the sound, my uncle on the piano, and I was early playing piano and violin. And now I'm going to learn my guitar that I was supposed to learn many moons ago. Dwayne, my good friend from Tony, was supposed to teach me guitar many moons ago. We never got around to it. So now I've decided I'm still going to go forward and learn my guitar now. But yeah, I remember that. I remember my uncle having, my grandmother's house being the house where many of the musicians, hung out, and people say, folks that artists of the day, the wisp, different folks who were known up in the Bay Area definitely had some time shared in that space. But I think it was so valuable because it also feeds your brain, again, which feeds how you perform and feeds your rhythm and all of these other things. So along these journeys, traveling around the world as a rock star, these days, that still is something that a lot of our young people naturally are interested in, and the entertainment, being on the roll. But it's a competitive space oftentimes, and there's a lot that you can encounter out on the road, unknowns if you've not been out there before. So kind of speak to that journey in terms of not only what you gained, but what you had to develop in order to not only stay the course, but to excel while building a career and traveling as an entertainer and performer.
hmm Again, I was born in 1955, so I matured to a young adult by the late 1960s. And this was an incredibly dynamic time in social, political, cultural history. Changes are just coming so rapidly. We see the rise of the civil rights movement, them gain their victories, the rise of Black power, the rise of Pan-Africanism, and a consciousness that I am more than just a Black American. I am an African on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to the evolution of the personality in such a dynamic, rapidly changing era. The innovations of television, and then we saw the internet come in and computers come in with such rapid changes going on. And the fact that during this time period, for the better part of over a decade, I was on the road traveling for a minimum of about 10 months during the year. So it forced me and my lifestyle to become incredibly adaptive. And I
Mm,
think that ability to be in a spectrum of dynamic environments and to be adaptive was humbling and allowed me to hone my skills, my talents, to refine the way that I saw myself, my mindset in action in community engagements. I think is among the most valuable things one could ever imagine. I would love to be able to replicate, duplicate, and build upon the same dynamic environmental shifting in children, as many children as I could possibly influence, to realize life is just a continuity of these dynamic moments. So don't waste any of them. Get all that you can get from all of them. And if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I would just say a couple of things. I did a good job of not spending my money on pointless consumerism and other diversions, alcohol and drugs and things. I did a really good job of concentrating my money into what I perceive to be long-term investments. But I would say to myself, realizing that life is such an incredible spectrum of dynamisms, dynamic moments, enjoy them all, and write down as much as you possibly can. And I've not done too bad at that.
exactly. I think that you've certainly created a history of lessons to be learned. And actually, let's talk a little bit about that because I find you to be a pretty prolific writer and your work to be very well researched. So, when did you begin to recognize kind of that part of you required a space? Was it after you were touring, you sort of said, okay, well, now let me transition into my next chapter? Or was it a little bit of how, while you were touring, ideas were forming and you were kind of keeping notes along the way in between? Kind of explain to us how that process emerged for you.
Mhm. Again, as a child in primary school, we were well prepared by our mother. By the time I entered the first grade, our mother had taught literacy to myself and my twin brother to such an high extent that I was literally learning from my father's college textbooks in the library we had at home, teaching myself to speak French before I was even in the first grade. So therefore, the early school years were just a breeze, and because we had already developed a very high level of literacy. And that high level of literacy gives a child the confidence that they can then demonstrate in their own life, so that whatever comes in that academic environment of the schooling years, they're always going to know they're going to do really well because their parents prepared them to be years ahead of their peers. Beyond that, I fell in love with writing poetry when I was in junior high school. Later, that manifested in my life in writing some 300 songs as a professional musician, some 80 or more of which eventually made it onto sides of records and albums and things. But when I came out of high school and was still living in central Ohio while working in the laboratory, I then came across the opportunity to start writing concert and record reviews for an entertainment newspaper published in Columbus, Ohio. And the first time I remember seeing my byline in the newspaper, I opened it up. I think I probably grabbed 20 copies of it. It was free distribution. And I saw my byline and my picture in it. It sparked something that has never faded away. And later during the years, as I was touring, I started to do scientific research again. When I would go to a city like Baltimore, I'd make it a point to go visit Johns Hopkins University 2-3 days during that week and study in the library there. I did the same thing at UCLA, USC, Cal State University, Long Beach. Universities all across the country became one of my compelling fascinations. And as I was doing these studies, I started writing again. So it was in Southern California right around 1985, 86, that I started writing for a community newspaper that was Black cultural economics centered. And that reinvigorated my love for writing, resulting in, by about 1987 or 1988, I wrote the first of what will very soon be 51 published books.
Wow. Wow. And I know you said you're working on 2 books presently, 2
I'm
more
working
books?
on four books
4
simultaneously.
books. Okay, 4 books. Wow. All right. So amazing amount of work and focus and dedication. So we talk about manifesting those outcomes. What
And
do
it's
you
mindset.
It is about mindset, because that's just it. So for me, what informs a lot of my mindset is I bought into this idea early on. I followed some of Stephen Covey and other, thought leaders' perspectives with this kind of begin with the end in mind. What is it, the legacy that you would like your life to manifest, right? And so when you think about that from the perspective of your family, the community, your profession, and then you work backward by evaluating where you think you are along the journey in relationship to those particular outcomes, that's been my rudder. And that's what, irrespective of the turbulence that I've had to navigate, I've been wiped out a few times, but I still get up to bat and swing for, the fences each time. But I've taken some real hard tumbles, some tumbles that, early on folks would say most people would have ended their lives because the losses were so significant that they wouldn't have had the heart. But it was me, my mindset was all about my why for building the organizations that I've built have always been because I felt that my leadership as an employer needed to exist in the space, that my vision for developing an organization and how organizations exist as community stakeholders, within the sphere of influence that they occupy, which was why I guess I was always interested in having a global organization, or organization that had enough size and scale that the vision and the way that we go about creating, what we create could reflect my thought leadership beliefs based on my experiences of sorting through, bad experiences and leaning more towards the better experiences and determining which experiences I wanted to cultivate and create with that end game in mind. Mine being that I wanted to have touched the most businesses that I could and help families cultivate generational wealth. And so my own interest, my study in that began when I was about 18, when I was curious about how an IBM could exist over 100 years. And for me, that was significant because that meant that the founders, were dead and gone, but the organization had to continue to have enough sustainability baked in that it can transition leaders, could transition periods, demographics, economic cycles, and still find a way to be relevant and continue to thrive, going forward. And so that's what I see is a big missing piece in terms of wealth for those of us of African descent. Our wealth is going to be built upon our ability to create sustainable organizations. But even though I have, over the course of my career, had an opportunity to run the plays and perfect the technical requirements to produce those outcomes, it was when I set out the initiative to train 100,000 farmers and entrepreneurs in Jamaica to start to implement these programs that I was immediately cautioned. Well, you couldn't go into that plan yet. You had to do a precursor. You have to help these people first address their mindset wounds, because until they heal the trauma, the emotional trauma, then what's showing up is why we can't work together, why we can't build, all of the reasons why what I was suggesting could not produce the outcomes that I intended. And I intend to hit my target. So, a strategist, I'm like, no, 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 no. We'll do a course correct because the target will be hit. So, that was kind of, if you will, the backstory for me, and what informed why right now, with things like the Naked with Dr. Money tour, with this opportunity to contribute to the conversations that are being had around mindset, and why mindset is so critical as it relates to mental illness. We talk about your food science and nutrition, why we have to detox, all of these different things. So, kind of in that bucket. All right, what is it that you're seeing? You have a lot of conversations and content where you're engaged with communities, not only locally, nationally, but internationally. And it seems that my observation is that in these conversations, you're looking to replicate some of the experiences around community economics, community building, community wellness, understanding that the health, the nutrition is a foundation upon which we need to build it all upon. So why don't you speak to a little bit of your thoughts around, those particular perspectives?
When we talk about mindset, that to me implies a mental foundation. And so, therefore, in my life and in my philosophies about moving forward, these foundations become very, very important. I am notorious for formulas. I love formulas. In almost every book that I write, I try and come up with a profound formula that people can utilize to get themselves moving forward, such as one of the most fundamental formulas: food is nature's most perfect medicine. And of course, all of the things that would follow that. Well, Hippocrates said, let your food be your medicine. To that, I add, as a gourmet chef, medicine has never tasted like this before. So we're putting together these fundamentals, these foundations. Another couple of foundations, and as you were speaking, these foundations kept coming to me. And I try and do my best to word them as brief as possible so that people don't have to work too hard to understand what it is I'm trying to convey. Another one that you were talking about really resounds with me, and it's called set your goals, get your goals. It's a three-part formula. Number one, be very clear about what is the destination. Number two, be very clear, I'm going to reach that destination. But number three, what's implied there is now I'm committed to the actions necessary to complete this journey of set your goals and get your goals. Another one that comes readily to mind is this, a very strong foundation in my life. The future belongs to those best prepared to create that future today. And with the upcoming wellness tour, is definitely we're going to be working alongside people, closely with people, talking about what kind of a future do we imagine giving as a gift to our children, to our grandchildren, and future generations. Are we prepared? Have we prepared ourselves to create that future today, to lay down the foundation? And last point is, when we see opportunity, and opportunity is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's all around us. A general rule is get in early, get in deep. So those are just some of the numerous formulas and foundations that I have latched upon that guide me, keep me moving forward, and keep me as productive as I possibly can imagine myself.
Well, I appreciate the way because you're right. People, when they hear a message, they need some action items, and they need to be simplified. And so I love that. I think that that's very important. You and I know, Doc, have had conversations about one of your books in particular, The Blackest Soil, as we were talking most recently about many opportunities on the continent. So I'm wondering, as because when we think about this and we think about what we should be looking at, and as we're positioning ourselves, maybe share a few of the thoughts that you have, because I know we've talked about the ability for the world to be fed from the continent, which picks up on your last statement about opportunity. When I hear people reflect, or if you will, the R word, the recession word, is running around in the US, but those of us who study cycles, know that it's all cyclical, and that the cycles are not always for the purpose that you hear. They're intended for a different opportunity. So we can't get caught up in just those narratives. What else is happening at this? And so what else is happening is that the continent is rich with overflowing opportunity. That, it's kind of like the old book, Who Moved My Cheese? You need to
Hmm.
look for cheese in some new place. If the cheese is running low over here, you better start looking for some cheese in some other places. So, you know, take on your thought from there.
Well, you mentioned a book that I am always willing to talk about. I think it's an incredibly exciting book, and others seem to be agreeing with it. The book is called The Blackest Soil: Africa Can Feed the World. This book is a scientific roadmap to agricultural preeminence for the 21st century. We've had so many conversations where it might come up, Africa has the ability with its arable soils and its free flowing fresh waters to feed the world. Yet then the reality is that currently Africa is a net food importer. So I put this book together in conjunction with a number of other serious patterns going on to lay out a roadmap to this agricultural preeminence. I'm just going to share just one of the kind of just a couple of lines from the book. With optimally transformed policies, Africa's 2.160 billion acres of arable land can supply daily 2,200 calories to as many as 12.9 billion people. That's just simple formula, calculation, mathematics, feeding 12 people per acre, or actually feeding 6 people per acre, 12.9 billion people. Africa can feed the world. So therefore, we have that understanding as the goal, the destination. We understand where we are right now with Africa's current about $500 billion annually in food production needs to grow to well over $1 trillion annually production in this field to be able to match its potential. Ultimately, the potential of African agriculture before the year 2050 is, I believe, anywhere between 4.1 and 4.3 trillion dollars. At that particular point, Africa should have taken over the place as the number one food producer and exporter in the world. And the other beautiful added bonus, Dr. Stephanie, is that because African farmers have been deprived the luxury of expensive chemical pesticides and chemical fertilizers and insecticides, Africa's soils are largely pristine, and so therefore, Africa can not only dominate global food production and export, but it will be largely organically produced. That gives us an incredible advantage. Africans, it's time that we stand up and we take charge of our own destiny and our own potential to give the world a whole new option in eating clean for the centuries ahead.
And I think that that's so important because I think that, when people say, even in my early conversation, like, who knew you'd be in farming? And it's like, well, there's a point when you get real clear about your food supply, you may want to be, and when you
That's
think
right.
about, the supply chain and the value chain, you don't have to be the one out tilling the land if that's not your particular area of expertise. You can participate somewhere within the supply chain to help
That's
make
right.
these things happen. And so, as a businesswoman, what I know that I know how to do is organize business, labor, materials, capital, right? And create infrastructure that can then be capitalized and that can be structured in such a way that is sustainable and is scalable. So, taking into consideration what it is that I know how to do, that I've done well, I've run this play over and over again, it's easy for me to know what my lane is, right? I got it. I got my lane. But within that, let's kind of connect with everyone else and bring that awareness forward. So I'm really excited because what I see is I'm seeing through the same lens that you're seeing, is I see opportunity, and I see more opportunity than there are even people, signing up to participate in those opportunities. And so it's kind of that paradigm shift and the mindset of recognizing, why are we all running over here, 100,000 of us trying to go after 5 opportunities when there's 100,000 opportunities and there's not even 5 people going after those. It's like, right. Right. I'm just saying, think about it. That's really what it's all about, is understanding, where is there an opportunity? Where is there a need? What problem is it that you can solve? Where is there more demand than there is sufficient supply? That's where you go and find a business opportunity.
That's
That's
right.
how to build a sustainable organization. And so what we're doing in our efforts to not only, I see, my lens is, it's not about just doing those things, which it is that we are, but it's also communicating the process of doing those things so that people are enrolled along the journey. Because I notice, particularly on my development hat, development is such a long lead item that a lot of times, if people are not in the boardroom when you're doing all the planning and pre-development and design, that 3 to 5 year lead time, somebody on the outside is not aware. They don't understand, the zoning, entitlements, legality, structure, capital formation, and all of those things. When they see a development project, is finally when, we start doing site work, when we start putting up a fence and we began to get the soil prepped and doing soils reports and determining, underground infrastructure that needs to be created. Then suddenly people are like, oh, you got a developer. I said, no, we've been working on this project for 5-10 years before we got to this point. So I think that, in planting these seeds and creating the awareness that these types of conversations are to say, hey guys, this is happening now. Get your mindset, heal yourself, heal your body, mind, body, and soul, because that way you're going to be your best you, able to explore opportunities, to think about what exists for your family to partake in, right? But more importantly, we've got to get our bodies healthy. Because I
Mm.
could say, speaking from the perspective of being American, and the American, food supply and diet is one that can contribute to, as we see, to a disproportionate amount of unhealthy behavior and outcomes. And I think that what we can attest to, those of us who are in the know, who see it, is that these are lifestyle decisions. And so it's
Hmm.
mindset that allows you to make decisions to want your body to be in a different condition. Like, you decide that you don't want to continue down the path of sick care, that you don't accept the narrative that, oh, I retire at 65 and by 75 I'm dead, or I'm on 100 prescriptions. Like, who said?
It's very sad. It's very tragic. And as you stated, and people have to take this to heart, these are lifestyle, the accumulation of lifestyle choices, many, many choices. We make 100, maybe 1,000 decisions a day that ultimately bear upon our status of wellness and our healthcare status for the decades of our life. And it's time that we stop wasting.
Yeah.
Being sick is a waste of energy. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It is a waste of a self-confidence, a mindset. It's a waste of our mindset if we accept the fact that we're going to be living such large sections or proportions of our lives being sick. You'll hear a phrase such as, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Well, you need to be tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And
Yeah.
so ultimately, the only way you're going to extract yourself from that equation is invest the time, invest the money, invest the energy, invest the focus in the wellness pathway. And then you no longer have to make that claim, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. People, we can do this. We can do better than that. And I'm going to repeat myself. The future belongs to those best prepared to create that future today.
Absolutely. And kind of along those lines, Keidi, I know that one of the things that you often share is your commitment to just your personal wellness. You have several push-up records that people are actively watching, and some in awe, some in a little bit. You got a little fire going under some folks we know in common. Not gonna say no names, but
Yeah, it's a family affair.
but here's
Wellness rituals, wellness practices, wellness exercises, we can approach them begrudgingly, or we can approach them, here's a chance to dance with my own body, my own character. Let's get this party started.
absolutely. And to me, that's it because, I have a client that I'm working with. She's in the process of opening up a memory care facility. And I said, not to steal from another organization that considers itself the happiest place, on the world. But the idea to
Mhm.
me is any place that I'm spending my time from now to however many days, hours, minutes I have remaining, every day I'm expecting to be in the happiest place. You know what I'm
That's
saying? So
right.
we have to think of how do you bring that, and you bring that in a combination of ways. You physically have to move your body and be engaged. I love to dance. I love music. So, I plan to be dancing all the way till I can't dance no more. Right. I plan to be moving and engaged, and I hope to be laughing and, sharing good times, exchanging high vibration energy because I know that that's what makes me feel my best. I love it when I'm bouncing off the ceilings. And so I think it's fabulous that, not only are you who you say you are, but you demonstrate that by your actions, because that to me is what I say how I evaluate the truest of what a teacher really is. A teacher spends time learning and teaching, and teaching not only through their articulation, but really through their demonstration. Because I think
Mhm.
that people can model what they see. So you hear what I say, but you watch what I do. And if it is that I'm doing what I'm saying that I'm committed to, then I begin to leave, if you will, breadcrumbs on how you too can follow along that path. And I know that that's what I think of when I think of you. You have continued to contribute texts and knowledge, very well researched publications that really should become required reading for families, as they continue to develop. And I know that as we open up our resorts around the world, we will always have your books stocked in our libraries, because I'm about that kind of, knowledge and making it accessible, because I want people to go and sit in our library, and every property will have a library or reading room somewhere, because if otherwise I wouldn't be being true to who I am. That's, a signature
Mhm.
of who I am, and that's something that I love to do. And I think that you pass it on. Our young people get enrolled and engaged in reading, much like you shared, having a home library. I was a young person exposed to a home library, a early selection of law books and everything. And I read all of it. I was reading about forming corporations at, 8, 9 years old. Nobody told me to go
Mhm.
read the legal books. I was curious. So I decided to read about corporations. Who knew? you know, and
Mhm.
so I am true to
That's right.
I am true to, and that's where we talk about that nature, right? But I was nurtured to believe that it was okay to have those interests. There's like, it's a little weird, but okay, that's who
Mhm.
she is. So with that, before we go, Keidi, just any last thoughts that you may want to share as nuggets, going forward. Obviously, you and I will continue to have conversations. We're going to be able to bring our conversations live through our tour. But tell me, what are some thoughts that may have emerged, and some last comments that might be meaningful?
First, I want to build upon the very point that you were making, the value of literacy in raising a citizen up to their greatest potential, raises us up to be the greatest contributors to our family And I still do believe, and I know you do, believe in the family as the most fundamental, basic unit of living, that we love and we live inside of extended family units. That's all very important. But literacy is much, much too precious for us to default and allow it to be displaced by electronic media, social media, and all of these distractions that have raised up in our generation. Further, I'm just going to encourage everybody out there to look deep inside. Do it today. Do it soon. Get in early, get in deep. Or get into yourself. Get into your drives, your motivations, your ambitions. What particular skills set and resources did the Creator embed within your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, and then bring you to this world, let you loose on this world, and instruct you to do great things in the limited amount of time that we have available? Life is dynamic. Life is beautiful. Life is loving. Life is giving. Life is so great that we even aspire for longevity so that we can have more life to do more great work. And if anybody wants to know more about what I do, I encourage you to look for my books on my personal website, Keidi, Keidi.biz. Amazon is very fortunate. I think they have 43, 44 of my books up now, and I'm going to be sending them 2 more books within the next 7 days. So we're here. We are bold, we are brilliant, we're foresightful, but we need a lot more support from the community to which we've committed ourselves. That's a good message for today, I hope.
Oh, that's a brilliant message for today. And it definitely leads into how we hope to connect with people as we go around the country and the world, as well. So certainly looking forward to connecting and being able to give people tools. But you're right. You have to be interested in those tools. We can't just bring you solutions if you're not interested in receiving those solutions. So absolutely, it requires a two-way relationship. And we want to develop that relationship with you for your wellness and your wealth.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
It's a great
Absolutely.
message.
Well, Keidi, thank you again. I'm so excited that we had this opportunity for this conversation. I've been eager to get a chance with you. So thank you again for your time today. And I look forward to our next conversation.
It's been a great conversation, Dr. Stephanie. I look forward to the next time I get a chance to get naked with Dr. Money. Peace and
Fantastic.
prosperity.
All right. Take care. Well, guys, I want to thank you again for tuning in for this episode of Naked with Dr. Money with my guest, Chef Keidi. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and maybe we planted a few seeds, gave you a few nuggets for consideration. And guess what? If it's Wednesday, Pacific Daylight Time, tune in to Naked with Dr. Money, and I will see you again soon. Be well.